Hi, everybody. Welcome to our installment of Ask the Expert, where I sit down with innovators, leaders, creative thinkers, and experts in their field. And I'm so excited today to make this Ask the Expert all about asking the highly organized woman. So before we get started, I just want to say thank you to Carrie Collins. So excited to have her today as our guest. Carrie Collins has a PhD and a JD in crafts order from chaos. She creates inspired and inventive ways to find time, and she's a consummate connector of individuals and ideas, which I can say for myself, I have seen as a fellow member of the organization Chief, where Collins is very active and has shared a lot of her tips with that organization. So I'm so excited to have her here today. In January 2020, Carrie founded How, the Highly Organized Woman, to teach people how to find time by thinking strategically about productivity, performance, and leadership progression. As the ultimate highly organized woman, Collins has taught thousands of people how to find time with innovative strategies that shift thinking, spur actions, and create results. And so today, I'm really looking forward to talking with Carrie all about how to be more organized, both in our current work environment and maybe our future work environment, and how leaders think about productivity and efficiency in constructive and maybe not so constructive ways. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you, Nora. I am so excited to be here. This is amazing, and I'm just hoping I live up to that very lovely and fluffy bio, if you will. So it's a pleasure to be here.
No doubt, no doubt. And to all our audience, this is also your opportunity to ask the expert. So as I'm talking with Carrie, please post any questions that you have in the LinkedIn chat. We have folks joining us from around the world today. I'm very excited about that. And I also want to just call attention to image thinker Sasha Brito, who will be visualizing and creating her own organization out of our discussion today. So Carrie, first off, I'm really curious, what are some common misconceptions we have about time and time management? You know, we talk about that a lot. And I've always heard, oh, you know what, multitasking isn't a real thing. So in your work, what have you seen in terms of maybe some ideas that we hold on to about how to be productive and manage time?
Sure. I think that a lot of us find ourselves saying, I'm so busy, and really sometimes using it as an excuse to actually just sit down and get things accomplished. I think we like to hold on to being busy as a crutch. It's somewhat of a status symbol, depending on the industry or the workplace that you're in, to say, I can't, I'm too busy. And I think there's no doubt that we all have a lot going on in our lives, from personal, professional, family, friends, everything, that it can be difficult to manage and balance all of these things, but it's not impossible. And I think there's a lot of folks that I'm fond of saying, you know, if you just spent 45 minutes taking the yoga class, you would save yourself the 60 minutes from saying you're too busy to take the yoga class. So sometimes I think we just need to get ourselves in order and move ahead and go. And I think the busy will start to take shape in a much more orderly fashion.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, I do think that sometimes we just default to saying we're really busy. And someone once said to me, it's not that you're too busy, it's just not a priority, right? If that's your response, which, you know, you can't say yes to everything. And I love that example about the yoga class, because I was just thinking, my husband and I have been talking for like months about sitting down and planning a household budget. And we've spent way more, finally we did it, but we spent more time talking about when we were going to do it and making time to do it than what it actually took us to do, you know? So just, it sounds like the first tip you have for people on strategy is to maybe just do the thing you want to do and not worry so much about how you're going to fit it into your schedule. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, I think that's true. And, you know, a lot of this stems from one of my number one strategy for productivity that I talk about the most with the most number of people in the most settings is to write everything down. And people kind of look at me like, of course, that's not revolutionary. No, it's not. But I write down absolutely everything. And I think from yesterday, I got a text message from a member of our networking group, and I saying, did I know somebody who could do creative work, branding, marketing? And I said, sure, I'll make an intro tomorrow. So I went to my to-do list and I wrote down, introduce person A and person B. It took me less than 10 seconds to write that down. And then I didn't have to keep space in my brain to remember it. And today when I woke up, there it was. And I made the intro, checked off the box, and the two women are now connected. So I write down everything imaginable. Call this person, do this task, work out every day is something that I have on my to-do list. Absolutely everything gets written down, and I'm far less likely to forget things, and I'm far less likely to waste time going, what was it that I said I was going to do that now I can't remember to do?
So it sounds like, first off, just knowing the reality of that you will forget, that you can't remember everything, and just accepting that and taking notes. So one question I think that comes up probably a lot, and I'm curious what your approach is. When you say you write it down, there might be some of our audience out there in LinkedIn land joining us that might want to know, what tool do you use for that, right? Or is it a paper list? Is it one of, those $35 organization notebooks and diaries? Is it an app? What do you use, and how important do you think the platform is for folks in staying organized?
That's a great question, Nora, and I'm actually going to answer it in reverse, which is this strategy works for any tool, any system, or any process. So if you are a Trello aficionado, this will work for you. If you are if you have to use Microsoft because of your office is a Microsoft office, this strategy will work. If you like paper, I've got tools that you can use. I will say there are a lot of people who are very big fans of sticky notes, Post-it notes, and have the work of art around their screen, right, with a different colored Post-it notes. And I'm not suggesting that you need to get rid of that work of art, but I think what makes me the most efficient and effective is using a digital to-do list. And my preferred platform is Todoist, Todoist. It's very similar to a lot of other products out there, but I love that I can create different lists and color code them. And then I can sort by list, or I can sort by date. So I know what's coming up today. I know what's coming up in the next several days. And I can see, ooh, wow, I'm doing a lot of work for work. And maybe I'm not going to get through all that. Maybe I should shift that. I have a list for personal, for my business, for my networking group, for my day job, for when I was teaching, I had a list for teaching, and everything is color coded so that it is really easy for me to scan that list and go, okay, I know I can fit this in. And if not, I can pick up that task and move it around. So Todoist is my favorite, but the idea of writing things down works no matter what kind of tool you use.
Okay, so really from the Post-it note wreath, which I have definitely been guilty of, but I love how tactile it is. I had a business partner who just thought it was too messy. She didn't like how messy that was, but really sounds like you're saying whether you're in the Post-it note camp or you're using something like Evernote or Todoist, really the principle is the same. It's just write it down, organize it.
Right. And for people, there's a lot of people who like paper and pen. They like the physical act of writing, as I'm watching Sasha sketch here. I mean, there's a lot of people like it because it commits to memory what it is that they're writing down. And so for that, I say there's two tools I recommend. One is, that's fine, write all you want to your heart's content, and then use a scanner app, whether it's called Scanner Mini, or if you're an iOS user on your iPhone, the Notes app now has a scanner. Scan your notes, send them off to a digital destination, a folder, whatever, and then you don't have to keep the paper. and you've been able to do the writing down, but you're not wasting time transcribing those notes or having them litter your desk everywhere. And the other tool is a Rocketbook, which is for $35 you can buy this with a really simple pen. You write the notes, you scan it with their app, and it goes off to any digital destination, and then you wipe it clean with water. So it's very sustainable, it's reusable. I keep one in my briefcase all the time. So for those who like writing, there's definitely a tool that will work for you as well.
Oh, great. Sounds like we need to put together the Carrie Collins shopping list, right? The Rocketbook, the Todoist. Those are some really fun toys and tools, right? To have fun with it. And one of our earlier conversations, that reminded me of something we talked about, because a couple of years ago, I was using kind of one of those planner journals, right? Where you sort of schedule everything out, and at the end of the day, you kind of write how you're tracking to your goals. And I don't know, I'd say probably for 9 months, maybe it was COVID that put it into it. I can't even remember. That really worked for me, but I'm not using that anymore. And I was just wondering, have you seen that happen for folks, that they start to shift the tools that they're using, and talk a little bit about what you've seen in terms of how people sort of behave moving from one system to another?
Sure. I think people really want to be wedded to a system. They want to find a system that is with them for the rest of their lives. And I think that's kind of an unrealistic expectation. The stages of our lives change, the needs that we have change. And so it could be that the tool that works the best for you now is not the tool that's going to work for you in 6 months. I mean, I'm chuckling. I'm thinking back to when I was a little baby lawyer, and I had a Palm Pilot with a stylus. So I'm probably dating myself, but any of you out there in Gen X probably know what a Palm Pilot is. So that worked at the time. But so not being entirely wedded and thinking I have to stay with this system because it's the system I picked, even if it's no longer working for you. I do think you should give it a certain amount of time to see whether, you give some time to work the kinks out of any tool or any system. But if you've used it for, 3, 4, 5 months and it's just not meeting your needs, or you're trying to create workarounds around the system you've decided is the one for you, then you can date a few systems before you should feel compelled to wed one, if you wed one at all. I was a very, very big user of Apple's reminders for many, many years. And then when they changed the iOS or did something, it went all wonky. And I got a new one because I needed the tool that I was using to do these 3 things, and it was no longer doing that. So you shouldn't feel compelled to stay with a system that isn't working for you any longer.
Great. So, if our relationship, it sounds like, to being organized was a romantic relationship, you could be polyamorous or, date around, it sounds like, versus committing right away. That's helpful too, because I think that the pressure to find the right perfect system for me means that I feel like I have to shop, oh, I need to do some research. Is this the right one to commit to? But it sounds like you're giving us permission to use one, and then if it's no longer working, just change it up a bit, try something different.
Right. I would say, just like anything, if you find a system, whether it's one that we're talking about or one you have on your own, give it some time to work, because you don't want to be in this frantic, well, I tried this one for 2 weeks and then I'm going to try this one for 2 weeks. You want to give it some time to sort of settle and see, maybe go through a business cycle. Is that a month? Is that, 3 months? And see how it's working for you. And if it's not quite right, try to identify what isn't quite right about it, so that then you're going into the selection of your next tool armed with a little bit more information.
Great. Well, I'm seeing a number of questions coming in from LinkedIn, which is exciting. So maybe you can help out some of our listeners here with some specifics. So Christine Babick, hi Christine, is the Director of Communications at the College of Engineering, Purdue. And she says that she likes writing on paper to include each day's meetings in a notebook. But life is not in that sequence, and that she finds that she goes back and searches for topics as needed. And this feels really inefficient. So it sounds like she likes writing in the notebook, sounds like she likes to organize it around the meetings, but then finds it hard to find what she needs when she needs it. Any tips for Christine on that?
Sure. I would say that, again, you like the writing and that's fine, but I would scan those notes for the day and then organize it in a Dropbox, Google Drive, whatever your system is, by date. And that should help you be able to go back and find. Now, if you're looking for specific topics within those notes, then that may require you to either find a tool that will convert your handwriting into text so that you can search it, or create keywords in the way you save it, date, notes, Ray, and then RE, and then one or two of the key topics. But rather than flipping back and forth, if you save each of the day's notes and by date with a keyword, or have something that will convert handwriting to text, you'll be able to find those keywords really quickly.
Great. So it sounds like starting with writing, but then digitizing it at some point to catalog it. I have the same problem, Christine. I really, for a long time, a big just notebook person, but then it was either sequential, it was hard to find, or I would try to divide up sections of the notebook by topic. And that worked a little bit better, but there's always, I guess, a little bit of friction in the tool, any tool that you have. Another great question kind of relates to this, which is, I was wondering this myself. So thank you, Carol Cool, who's joining us as a freelance writer and foundation. Wow, she does a lot of stuff, education and nonprofit and editor. Fantastic. So her question to you is, if you're using multiple lists, like you said, you have it color coded, for your networking, your business, teaching, how do you go across that and then figure out how to prioritize day by day if it's sort of by buckets?
Sure. So the tool that I use, Todoist, will do that for you automatically. So if you enter in a task for the networking group and you have a due date of Thursday, then you can look at everything in the networking group, but then you can look at it by day. And so it will show me that on Thursday, I have this task in my networking group. So it will do it for you automatically. As long as you assign a task to a particular list, then it will show up in your daily or weekly digest, if you will, and it will be coded to that particular list. So it does it automatically.
Great. So prioritize or organize by buckets and then by date, and that'll help make that automatic list of priorities for you. These are some great questions. Keep them coming in as we get to ask Carrie some more ways to be highly organized. So we talked a little bit about time and time management and this idea maybe about being too busy. Now, you have a really great catchphrase called, it's show busy who's boss. I love that, but I'd really love to hear, what does that mean, about being busy, and how, what does it look like when you show busy who's boss?
Sure. And actually, when you asked me this and we were talking before, I have a notebook, actually from our networking group, where I sort of built this business. And I can remember sitting at the kitchen table, writing through, I have 2 pages of trying to get to the right verbiage. And I finally got to this and I was like, that's it. That's what I want this business to be about. Because the idea is that you take charge of your busy. You don't let busy take charge of you. So you can take charge or control your calendar, your to-do list, all of your systems to make things work for you instead of you working for them. So, and it's not just about being busy. Think about your performance, your career path, whether you want to show public speaking who's boss. I mean, anything that you put your mind to and decide you want to look for strategies and tools that you can take charge and conquer that particular topic, except teenagers, because that's just not possible. It's not possible.
That sounds like a different segment of Ask the Expert for two. Okay, so really thinking about getting, taking the bull by the horns and deciding. It also sounds like some prioritizing there, right? You gave some examples, like, is it your speaking career? Is it your career in general? Is it a new project? Which, comes back to the idea of prioritizing. So another question I have for you, which is really, I think, you had some fun examples of What, you talked a little bit about strategies and strategies to have more time, which I'm sure our listeners would really love to hear. But also, you had, I thought, a really interesting just philosophy around doing this, around creativity and time management, which I think, for our listeners out there, might be kind of surprised by. I know that being a creative type, I don't necessarily think about being productive or time management as an area to apply creativity to. So tell us what you're thinking about that.
Sure. Well, and I do want to say a note about prioritization, which is one of the strategies that I tell people is that everything should have a due date. And if it doesn't have a due date, then assign one that seems reasonable, because you can't prioritize if you have no due date. So that could be, I want to do this task by December 31st. Okay, well, you've given yourself a long runway to do it, but if you don't put a due date associated with it and you have the control over the due date, then it's going to be really difficult to actually prioritize. So that's one way then, because then what will happen is in a system like Todoist or any of these digital to-do lists, anytime you assign the due date, then it will automatically sort it for you. So you know what it is that you need to work through. So I think the idea of creativity for me is, I've always fancied myself a rather creative person. And I think that the work that I do in helping people and getting all this stuff done, it burns a tremendous amount of creative energy. I'm always looking for solutions. I hate to be told no. And so how can I accomplish whatever the task is in the most efficient, the most effective and enjoyable way possible? And that requires a lot of creativity and imaginative thinking that, it's brainstorming, it's talking out loud. But I'm always surprised that the people who come to me and say, so what should I do about X? And I'm going, why are you, because I'm often the one who can take a look at all the different parts, the disparate pieces of information, synthesize it and say, here's a recommendation. And people, oh, okay. Okay. So it's incredibly creative. I mean, everything down to, I mentioned this one to you, using the lingerie bags to put your masks in to wash them so you don't lose them in a legging in the washer to the dryer, to using recurring reminders on your digital to-do list to update your LinkedIn and your resume on a quarterly basis. Because you never know when a board opportunity might come up, a speaking engagement, or that penultimate job. And who wants to spend hours and hours catching up 3 to 5 years worth of time when you last looked at your resume, when every quarter you can go, I did that last week. I did that 2 months ago. I should put that in. Every quarter you set that. So it's that kind of applying thinking and creative thinking to tasks that seem really mundane and lackluster in creativity.
Yeah, that's such an interesting concept. And I'm curious, when you're working with leaders and teams around this, do you find, and for yourself, do you find that those creative solutions just come to you in the moment that you're sort of having the pain where you're like, I can't find my mask, like where did it go and on my laundry? Or do you work with folks to like sit down and sort of look specifically at things that are sort of time wasters or challenges and then have them sort of tackle creative solutions for that all in one get-go?
I would say both. And I think it really depends on the issue at hand. When I am, at my day job, I have a very trusted number two. And so we're always having these debates and talk about multitasking. We have our weekly meeting every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. on the Peloton bike. We video chat while we have our meeting. So we're always going, well, is this the right way to do it? This seems really inefficient. Should we look at this a different way? And we're always brainstorming and actually there's a lot of very healthy conflict between us about ways to do things. And then sometimes I'm just sitting at home and going, this is a waste of everybody's time. There's got to be a faster way to do it. And sometimes things come to me, sometimes they come to me, I try it and then I refine it. But it really depends on the complexity of the issue or the situation. And then sometimes, I am sitting in meetings going, what if we did this? And sometimes it's heralded as, the greatest thing since sliced bread. And sometimes it's, no, we're not doing that. Okay.
Great. So kind of continually thinking about ways to make that sort of process improvement, right? To push yourself. In terms of prioritization, which comes back, right, to all of us, because there's the things that are most immediate and the things that are really important. If for our listeners right now that are excited and inspired to take this approach to like finding creative strategies to save time and show busy who's boss, are there any places that you feel like people should point to first? Like, is it the thing that you dread doing? Is it the thing that you're finding, always gets misplaced? For me, I feel like there's always like some calendar mismanagement where I've somehow scheduled 2 appointments at once. Where would you say we should first look to start remedying some of these things?
That's a really great question. And I would say I'm not one of those people who advises begin with the end in mind or tackle the toughest problem first. For me, it's very much about what's on my to-do list. I mean, I end up sounding like a broken record, but if it's there, it means I have deemed it something that's worthy and valuable to me in my time. And so I need to go through it. Now, within that, I think what is really powerful is this idea of setting yourself up for success, but with flexibility. So talking about, you and your husband budget, I was thinking about a woman who said to me, well, I wanted to work out. I wanted to do the 8 a.m. bar class, but I missed it. And so, there goes my day, the workout for the day. And I said, well, you can carve out time for a workout, but it doesn't have to be the exact same thing. Just as at a specific time, just as long as you do something that's related to workout, no matter when during the day you do it, no matter for how long you do it, and no matter what it is that you do. So I think setting yourself up and giving yourself flexibility is really, really powerful, because then you're going to start to see, I can do this, and one right after the other. So I might only have time for a 5-minute meditation today, and tomorrow I may have time for a 45-minute, Pilates class. But every day I'm carving out that little bit of time. I'm making it a priority for me. It's on my to-do list, but I've allowed myself tremendous flexibility within that piece of work and when I can get it done and how I do it, so that I am successful. Once I do it, check that off and move on to the next time or the next day. But I don't say to myself, I will get up every day at 6 a.m. and work out until 6:35 and then because that's not how life is. And so allowing yourself this time for flexibility you'll start to see how much you can really accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because when you think about my own preconceptions about being organized and time management, seems like a lot of rules, a lot of structure. But what we're hearing from you, Carrie, is be creative about it, be flexible in your approach, use a tool that works for you for a while. And if you find it evolves, like, hey, that's fine. So, it's really refreshing. I think a little surprising, to hear from me. We have a number of people posting questions out there in LinkedIn land. So, one of them back to prioritizing. Okay, so Carol asked the question about prioritizing the day's activities and choosing. Paula Van Dines, thank you for joining us, who is a PhD and scientific strategist at McCann Healthcare, is a big fan of the bullet journal. And yes, I was too, Paula, for a while there. But I have this problem, so I'm really curious what your answer is for Paula and other folks like me. Is she finds that she mixes her personal and business because she can't seem to manage multiple lists. So everything ends up on one list. And she's wondering, well, what advice do you have about that? But I think a more existential question is that even a problem, or is that just a perceived challenge of kind of intermingling your personal to-dos and priorities with your business to-dos and priorities?
Sure. And I think from a really pragmatic standpoint, this becomes really acute if your work uses a particular system and you have to have a totally different system for personal. So I've done work with a lot of banks and they're like, oh no, we can't do any of this stuff on our bank issued phone. Okay, well then that actually makes it a little bit easier because work is here and personal is here. If you're like me, where I can put everything together, then as I said, I have these different lists, but it gets sorted by day. And so I know that what's left on my to-do list today is I'm going to visit my parents starting tomorrow. I have pack. So yes, that I actually remember to pack a bag and that I pack the Afghan that I'm going to give my dad. So it's all intermingled in the way that I approach it. But I really do but applaud the flexibility. I mean, there's no rules here, right? It's just what works for you. So if you love bullet journaling and you find that that's very calming and soothing, and it helps you stay on track for both your personal and your professional, and they happen to be in two lists, and you're still getting through everything, by all means. But if you find that you're spending a lot of time rewriting lists and moving it from one day to the next, or, well, this is sort of personal, but it's kind of for business, but I have to do it during business hours, then query whether just one running list with maybe dots or P for personal, W for work, that way, maybe that is a better way to set up your bullet journal.
Yeah, that's great, because like I said, Paula, I struggle with that too, or I try to keep two journals and then I only have one with me. So I sort of, for me, have stopped worrying about so much the demarcation. But a couple other questions, two questions around color coding and visual cues, which is also a topic we love to talk about in ImageThink. So one question we have is via email was asking a little bit more about the color coding that you mentioned. And another question related is, how at ImageThink do we organize our visual notes? And as you can see from Sasha's board, color plays a big role in that as well. So Carrie, you want to tell us a little bit more about your color system?
Yes. So this does veer a little on the crazy side of organization. But so I use an email aggregator called Spark Mail. So that instead of having at one point I controlled 5 or 6 different inboxes. That all comes into one system, but you can set each inbox up separately. Each one of those has a color that matches the color on my to-do list for that particular area. So for my day job, it's blue. For my business, it's hot pink. For personal, it's green. So my personal email box is coded in green, and my work. So that for me, it's, if I see something that's green, I know that's a personal task. If I see something in my blue inbox or a blue dot, that's for my day job or my business or whatever. And so that it triggers an association, and it strengthens that association for me as I go forward. The system that I use allows you to assign colors, so you can pick any color to your heart's desire. And it's just a fun way for me to then look at my list, and it makes it a little less overwhelming because I can see those little colored dots and go, oh, all right, well, I got a lot of personal stuff today. Maybe I should move some of that stuff to the weekend. And, it just, for me, that visual makes it that much easier to see what's on tap and to know what to move and when.
That's great. So it sounds like one of the things that worked for you is if you have a color coding system, make that consistent everywhere, right? So in your calendar, in your inbox, if you can flag it, files, I know you can add color and Mac OS. And for us, taking a look at Sasha's board and answering how we keep ourselves organized or organize our boards, color is important as well, and really consistency. So you can see in Sasha's board that she's limited the color. So that creates a little bit of structure, right? And kind of like Carrie, that the color is consistent. So, red right now is used for text for things that are sort of bigger subject matters like prioritization or creative thinking, as well as keeping, you can see the yellow boxes for the call outs. It helps keep things organized and being consistent across that. For us too, around organizing visual notes is scale. So the size of something creates a visual hierarchy. And probably you can see that applied at all sorts of other places as well. So yeah, color is very helpful for those of you also that have a little bit of, want to embrace that creativity Carrie talks about and are using journals. You can also always make it visual, right? Add icons, add little illustrations or stars, bullets. Those things we at ImageThink see as being really helpful sort of visual cues for people as well.
Sure. I use a lot of stars. If I'm writing things, stars mean something, circles mean something, squares mean something. Whatever language you develop for yourself, if it's working for you and it helps you hone in on those things that are the most critical, then you're not wasting time flipping through your notes going, what was that thing I was supposed to do? So it's all about finding ways to cut through all the noise and get to the most important points as quickly as possible. So what Sasha's done here, my eyes are immediately drawn to the red. So prioritize, organized, boss. That's what I can, if I'm looking at this, that's what I see. And that's what I'm honing in on. And those are the key pieces of information that we want you to take away from this session.
Yeah, great. So we're thinking alike in that way of creating that hierarchy and that color. Another great question, and I want to talk to you a little bit more about strategy that came in. This one was sent through email. Do you have any tips for working with others who are less organized than you and with someone whose disorder is maybe hampering your progress? I wonder if you run into that, Carrie, being the highly organized woman that you are. What are tips when your collaborator, your partner, your work colleague doesn't have the same approach or the same bet for organization?
Yeah, so this is one of those, the struggle is real for me because there's very few people who rise to that level. I will say my husband is clutter blind, so he can't see that he's left 3 different socks in 3 different places, and drives me nuts. So when working with others, I think there's a fine line between creating a system or a process for everyone to follow, and always versus always being the one that says, I'll do the outline, I'll get it organized. And you don't want to be that person because that's way more work than you need to be doing, especially if that's not really your responsibility. So a lot of it takes effort to say to yourself, this person is not working at the same level of organization. This person thinks differently than I do and I need to follow the way this person is thinking. Now, how far do you follow them? Do you let the project, fail? No, of course not. There may be times where you have to step in, but it's taken me a really long time to finally feel comfortable with saying, I can't control everything. I can't be in charge of everything. And so I'm going to let these folks do what they need to do. And if they need help, they will come to me and I'll be more than happy to weigh in and say, oh, no, I think that's great. Or, hey, perhaps we could think about doing it a different way. So sometimes you just have to bite your tongue and let others find their way up until you see things going really far off the rails. And then it's okay to step in and say, I was thinking we could perhaps do it this way and have an outline or have the framework or have the process in place.
So it sounds like the advice that you have out there for our listeners is don't say yes to everything. Don't be offered to be the organizer every time because you'll find then your to-do list backed up. But be available to lend your skill when asked. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. I think that is wise. And yeah, for those people who are highly organized, probably something, a struggle that you have every day. So another great question for Paula, and this leads right into where the next topic I wanted to explore with you is, and I don't think Paula's alone in this either. Definitely have seen this with our clients as well. A big problem is how to make time for the big thinking and the big developmental projects when you realize that your whole day is full of small tasks that you have to mark off your list. So what are your thoughts around that? How is it that we manage doing the things we need to do and make time for the really big thinking and the really big projects that are probably more critical to us and more valuable or more important, but often get pushed to the side?
So the first part of that, I would say, is, do you really have to be the one to do all those little things on your to-do list? How many of those things can you delegate? And delegation can bring up a lot of anxiety in folks. I actually have a whole little workshop about how to delegate decisively, how to determine what should be delegated to whom, and how do you communicate that? Because a lot of times we're doing things that we probably you should work to your level, work to the level of your position, level of your license, as we say with physicians. And you shouldn't be doing some of these things. And so what is preventing you from delegating? Is it that, well, it's just easier to do it myself? And that I get back to the yoga class, right? Take a few minutes, invest in the time to teach somebody how to do it, and you will free up your time to do big picture thinking. If it's, well, he won't do it the way I would do it. That's true. That's probably very true. But does it have to be your way or the highway? And, if you're afraid that your employee, well, they just won't get it done in time. Well, okay, then maybe you need to invest in some efficiencies, whether it's processes or professional development, so that you're training your people to be able to do those tasks that you can move off of your plate. So once you have whittled down to just those things that really occupy your time, quite frankly, you need to block time for big picture thinking. You need to put it, on your calendar with a big block and force yourself to do it. No, the world isn't going to stop moving for everybody to say it's time for strategic planning. But if you don't do it, all of this other work and all of these other bits of activity are sort of going into amorphous goals, or not going into moving towards achievement of goals at all. You really just need to carve out the time and stick to it. And it doesn't have to be eons and eons and eons of time. Is it once a month? Is it once a quarter? Is it, twice a year?
I'm curious about that, because you're working with teams right now around making space for this. So when we are sort of thinking about strategic thinking and planning, and that could be, I believe that could be not just in the business, right? But that could be for your personal life, like your personal goals, for your family, right? To take a step back and say, what do we want to happen? What do you find are good intervals of time that people ought to program or schedule for themselves in terms of thinking strategically or pulling back and assessing, their bigger goals?
And I think that depends. That's my very lawyerly answer. It depends. But in all seriousness, so in our strategic plan, we look at it, the whole plan, the whole picture, on an annual basis. But on a monthly basis, I'm checking to see how are we progressing on the individual tactics that we have. How are the action steps coming along? Because if I wait 6 months and only do it, twice a year, we can't catch up. If we're not on track, then there's very little likelihood that we'll be able to get back on track. But so I would say is look at it in those kinds of increments. Is it, we're spending the year doing this, so we should probably check in monthly, or we're spending 3 years to do this, so we might want to check in twice a year, or the plan is 5 years, so once a year. In fact, we have ours coming up in 2 weeks. It's our annual, let's see how we did and let's plan for the next 12 months. So I think the size and the scope of what you're examining will really dictate and determine what that interval of time is. I mean, I mentioned earlier, just from a personal perspective, of checking on your LinkedIn profile and your resume on a quarterly basis, because monthly is too often. I mean, there's not a lot that's going to happen month to month, but in a quarter, you can look back and say, okay, I've done these things. This is also great for performance evaluations. Right? Everybody hates writing their own performance evaluation because they have to go back and remember what they did. Well, if you have that quarterly reminder, you're sitting down every 3 months and going, all right, this is how I was a rock star the last 3 months. And it takes 5 minutes. And when you come time for your performance evaluation, it's already all written. So the increment is tied, I think, to the scale and the scope of the particular project.
Great. So if the scope is really huge, you can make the increments farther apart. If it's a shorter timeline, then you're going to want to make space for those strategic things more frequently. That's great. Also, when we were talking about thinking about strategy and making sure that small things don't take up room for bigger things, you talked a little bit about, we talked a little bit, I think, a lot of this around our workplace, but what about our own career progressions and our own sort of personal aspirations? And what's your philosophy around that?
And I think that's, right now there's a lot, we're all reading about mass resignations, mass demands to stay at home forever and what have you. And so, the workplace is kind of in an upheaval, but taking yourself sort of a step back, a step out of that to say, what is it that I want to accomplish? Where is it that I want to go? And what do I need to do to get there? And I'm actually working with a couple organizations on career journey mapping. So it's a visual representation of where a person is starting from, where they are right now in their career, and where they want to get to in the next 3 to 5 years. And based on different elements, these are the activities that they can do to get from point A to point B. And so how often should you do that? Performance evaluation time, again, not most people's favorite, but that's a good point in time to say, how do I feel about the work I did over this past year? Regardless of my actual performance, assuming we all hit it out of the park, how do I feel about my value at this organization? How do I feel about the value of my work? How do I feel about, the station, the status that I have, the level that I'm in? Is this satisfactory to me? Because if it is, great, keep going. If not, then which factor is it that you are displeased with or would like to change? And that's going to then set up the process to determine, where do I want to go and what does a dream job look like? But I think you need to spend that time. You need to spend time thinking about where you are now to determine what is it that you like or don't like if you want to move forward in a very thoughtful way.
Yeah. So I think that that's great to remind ourselves, right, as we're busy managing our to-do list for for our workplace or our colleagues, to also step back and apply some of that strategic thinking to ourselves. So big proponent of that. And at ImageThink, we've seen the value of helping clients look at that. But also in my book, Draw Your Big Idea, we also have visual maps for people's own kind of career goals or aspirations. So I'm so glad that you're bringing that up. Right, Carrie. So before we wrap up, because this hour has gone by so fast because I haven't been managing our time very well, I do want to talk about something that I think is on everybody's mind, because recently I think you posted an article around how we might strategize about being efficient in hybrid work environments. I know a lot of folks are looking at maybe, 2 or 3 days in the office, 2 or 3 days at home, working with different teams. What tips might you have for people as they think about maybe shifting from working completely virtual, if you are right now, to, kind of a split environment?
Sure. And I have two really big, or really, I think, powerful strategies for this. The first one, so I don't know about you, but, and my day job office is 5 minutes that way. So it's not like I even have a long commute. But I got into the office a couple weeks ago and I was like, well, shoot, I don't have a webcam on this camera and I don't have my laptop, so I have to have meetings on my iPhone, and I didn't bring my charger. I mean, you're very unlikely to have the exact same setup at your home office that you are in your work office. And so that's a lot of back and forth and wasted time getting set up. So my first strategy is to create a tech kit. Buy a pouch, Landon, LB, whatever, use a grocery bag, it doesn't matter. But put all of your cords and favorite accessories in them. Are you very particular about your mouse? Some people are very particular about their mouse. Put that in your tech kit. Do you have blue light glasses? What about chargers for your phone, your earbuds, your computer, your iPad, what stuff do you need to be able to pick up and go anywhere? And if you have that tech kit, then when you're at home, it's right at your fingertips. You throw it in your in your backpack or your briefcase, you head to the office, you've got all your peripherals and things right in front of you. So that's going to shave off a tremendous amount of wasted time as we go back and forth. The other one is something that I talk about, just life in general, but I think is really, really relevant to this hybrid work, which is looking ahead. And so whether it's 1 to 3 days, what you really need to do is look at your calendar and your to-do list, but primarily for this purpose, look at your calendar. Am I in the office or am I at home? Because if you are going into the office, my theme for this is fuel. Do you have gas in your car or money on your Metro card? Or did you pack some snacks? Because who knows what the situation might be in your office? Do you have is your water bottle clean? Do you even know where it is? Is it clean? Have you filled it? And just making sure that all the fuel that you need to do your job, you know whether that's going to be tomorrow or whether that's, I don't know, is it Wednesday and Thursday? Where am I going to be from day to day? Because if you're going into the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, then it's a little less acute. But if you're going in Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 1 week, Monday, I don't know, is the car full? You don't want to wake up in the morning and go, it's an office day and I don't have anything ready. So that's particularly important, I think, as you start to transition back, depending on what your employer is doing, to say, okay, I'm looking ahead. I know I'm going to be in the office the next 3 days. I have all these things queued up and ready to go.
Oh, that's a great point. I love that idea about fuel, like how you're going to get there, how you're going to fuel your body, how you're going to hydrate, what do you need? And I'm thinking some of us at ImageThink, we used to be pretty great at this because we would fly often to see clients. So we had our kits already. Instead of having a toiletry bag where I had to move the stuff from my medicine cabinet there, I just bought 2 of everything. And so it stayed in my suitcase all the time. It was like greatest thing ever. I had an extra power cord and phone charger that stayed in there because that's the worst when you don't have that and you have to spend $40 at the airport, convenience store for USB cable. So yeah, some of those things I think I've used are really practical. And so for those of us that are, looking at working in 2 different environments and multiple environments, really thinking about, traveling with what you need and planning that ahead, you suddenly made me think, oh yeah, if you're working in the office, are your work clothes even ready? You have to be taken out of the closet and probably pressed. So those are great strategies for us to all think ahead as, our work environments can change over time. So Carrie, before we wrap up, any parting words of advice, for those of us who are folks out there that maybe don't feel like they are the highly organized person that they'd want to be, where would you point them to start? Where do you advise people to really begin?
So the first thing I want you to remember, everybody, is that you don't have to do it all. So it looks like I'm pretty together and I get a lot of stuff done, which is true. I don't cook. I don't really clean. I don't do math. I don't garden. So, there's a lot of stuff that are just beyond my capability. And at this point in my life, I have no interest in broadening my horizons to learn how to do some of those things. So I don't do it all by any stretch of the imagination. And you shouldn't waste 1 second of your time trying to do that either. The other thing I would say is just pick one thing. Just pick one thing, whether it's, okay, I'm going to start writing everything down, or I do write everything down, but I'm going to start scanning it, or I am going to start looking 1 to 3 days ahead to get my life together. And I'm going to make that a pattern, and I'm going to set an alarm on my iPhone every night at 6 o'clock to really do that until I get used to it. Just start with one thing, and I promise you things will start to fall in order.
Great. So first of all, don't do it all. I think that's great. Another exercise that I have in Draw Your Big Idea is called the anti-bucket list, which is instead of thinking about all the things that you want to do before, you turn 80 or 85, is think about the things that you just are giving yourself a pass about. Like, you're like, I'm never interested in doing that, right? Like, I don't ever care to learn how to bake my own bread. I do garden, however, but the bread making, crossing it off the list, don't need to do it, right? So there is sometimes like that's sort of liberating to just give yourself a pass for all the things you're not going to take on. And then, just pick one thing. It sounds like just start with one thing. Don't overwhelm yourself, which I've heard from other experts too, even thinking about, exercise or, employing a habit change is, start small. Those are some great tips. So, Carrie, thank you so much for joining. I just want to encourage everybody. One of my favorite things about knowing Carrie Collins is her LinkedIn post, true to who she says she is. You can read great articles about this and more in less than 2 minutes. That's her promise on her post there. And if you want to get in touch with Carrie or learn more about how to be highly organized, you can go to howhilyorganized.com. And she's got a lot of great resources there. Carrie, anything else you'd like to flag people, or what's the best way to stay in touch with you?
Sure. You can use the contact form on my website or email how@howhilyorganized.com. I am happy to talk about team trainings, one-on-one sessions, retreats, covering these topics, leadership, performance, all those things, how to find time by doing these types of things much more strategically and efficiently. So I am just beyond thrilled. Sasha, thank you so much for this visual scribing of our conversation today. I am delighted and hope, Nora, that your LinkedIn listeners took away some helpful nuggets today.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you that want to follow up or didn't catch all of this, it will also be, you can go back here to LinkedIn and find the full video. It'll also be on the ImageThink site under events. So you can watch the whole video with Carrie, take a look at Sasha's highly organized capture, and follow up with us for our next Ask the Expert. Thank you so much to Carrie and everyone joining us today from London, Pittsburgh, upstate New York, Portland. You've been a great group. And I think I have time for one more question. So thinking about you being a baby lawyer, Christine Babick says, lawyers and law students have to read very fast. As a publicity manager, I need to get a gist of multiple stories, but there's no way I can possibly read all of them. So any lessons from your life as a lawyer in terms of how to absorb all that information for Christine?
Become an expert skimmer. Skim, synthesize, output. You don't need to process every single word, every single piece of it to get the concept and to be able to take action. So I'm a very, very good skimmer.
Good. So embrace skimming out there, everybody. You can get more of the information that you need in probably less the time than you think. And everybody, Carrie Collins, thanks so much for joining us here and on LinkedIn.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.